welcome everyone. Welcome to our meeting. And tonight we have a special guest who's zooming in from outside of Sydney, wasn't it, Roger?
Yep, Kiama, yep.
Yeah, so Roger is a former neuroscientist with a Bachelor of Science degree and doctorate degree in neuroscience from the University of Sydney. And he's currently employed as a TAFE teacher in the pathology diploma at Ultimo. And he teaches molecular biology and statistics and human anatomy, physiology and microscopy. And prior to this, he was employed as a neuroscientist in the Department of Pathology at the University of Sydney for 15 years, during which time he designed and managed the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease surveillance laboratory for New South Wales and the neuropathology department in the Blackburn building. Rogers published several scientific papers on motor neuron disease and on image analysis applications in pathology. So Roger is a member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies in the USA and the UAP Medical Coalition in the USA. His personal UFO research interests include the Eric Davis Admiral Wilson notes, the Roswell incident, cattle mutilations in Australia, MJ12 documents, crop circles, and trace metal testing from alleged UFO crash debris. Roger's interested in astronomy and cosmology and was a semi-professional musician. So you've got quite a lot going on there, Roger.
I've got quite a lot going on, yes, sure.
So Roger's here tonight to talk to us about cattle mutilations and the congressional hearings and the Havana syndrome, and if time permits, also how the JFK assassination relates to the UFO subject. And I've forgotten the last thing, sorry, but it'll be in the description on YouTube.
I think that's enough, isn't it?
Yes. So he's hoping to squeeze a lot into our meeting tonight. So thank you, Roger, for joining us. And yeah, take it away.
Okay, thank you for having me, Cheryl. And so just a little bit about me again. So you've covered it, but I'm just going to cover it again just very quickly. So I attended the University of Sydney, did a Bachelor of Science degree, major in zoology, PhD in neuroscience, and motor neuron disease was my speciality. And currently I'm a teacher at Sydney TAFE. So there's the Blackburn building, which I spent many a day, an hour, and year in the neuropathology department for 15 years. And as a neuroscientist, we worked on human brain tissue, forensic cases, and pathology cases. So I'm very used to looking at the human brain, cutting it up and diagnosing various parts of the brain for particular diseases. So how did I begin becoming interested in UAPs or UFOs? I prefer the term UFOs. Well, I had a personal sighting when I was a teenager, and prior to that, I had experienced some panic attacks, which were unusual. I couldn't quite work out what was going on in my childhood. Some of those panic attacks were associated with imagery, with extraterrestrials, even cartoons or anything like that. Even just looking up into space really just sent me off for some strange reason. And programs like this one here, I'm sure
there is nothing wrong with your television set.
Some of you might have remembered this.
We will control the horizontal
series.
We will control the vertical. We can roll the image.
That was called The Outer Limits, and that gave me panic attacks. So my personal UFO experience continuing. So I was a bit skeptical about the UFO phenomenon as a teenager. I'd heard about it, and I thought it was science fiction until on my parents' property I had a sighting that occurred around about between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in a cloudless night sky. I got bored, so I went down to the bottom dam on my parents' property. They had a 25-acre property, as you can see here near Luddenham. That's where the property is, where the X is. And so we had a dam. That's the property there, an aerial view. And we had two dams there. This one was built later on, but the back dam was the one that I had the sighting on, which is where the arrow is here. So that's the actual dam that I had the sighting on. And this was during the drought, and the water level came up to here. You can see my cursor. But the UFO that I spotted, and I'll just do some image analysis to show you what it looked like in the nighttime. So I spotted a light coming from the south, and it slowly came closer towards me. I'm looking this way, I'm looking at towards these trees. Stopped in the middle here, and it was about the size of a 5-cent piece held at arm's length. Grew bigger and bigger, and then did a bit of a maneuver, which I thought was really very weird. And then that excluded everything. That excluded aircraft, excluded that it could have been a meteorite or anything prosaic. And then it actually zoomed down behind this hill and lit up the whole area as if it was day. And that really scared the bejesus out of me. And so I ran home to the farmhouse and told my parents, and that's where it all happened. So just that UFO sighting that happened for maybe a minute and a half completely changed my life. I also shared my experience with my uncle, who is my mother's brother, Uncle John, who's now deceased, unfortunately, but he was a market gardener who lived about 500 meters from my property in Luddenham. And he also confided in me that he had a close encounter with the UFO. He fell asleep in the paddock one day. As a market gardener, you do get tired. This was broad daylight, and he, upon waking, he saw a craft that was hovering a few meters above him, and that took off in a flash when he woke up. And as I said before, he died of motor neuron disease. So what got me interested in UFOs was that sighting, as I said before. And so I tried to, and this was probably late 70s, I'd say. Basically, I wanted to get involved in some way with organizations. So I found APRO, and I don't know how I found it, because it was prior to any internet or anything. So I must have researched it somehow through magazines. And then I joined APRO in 1978, which was founded by Coral Lorenzen, and I forgot his first name now, but was it Bill? No, the Lorenzens. So, and they had the APRO bulletin, which they used to issue out across the world. So APRO members elected to form a new group called the Midwestern UFO Network, and that expanded to the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. So much later on, I actually joined MUFON, which I'm going to talk to you about in a second. But prior to my involvement with MUFON, I did some independent research. So I read a lot of books and magazines, and in the late 80s, there was a book that came out that was published by an author called Timothy Good, and in that book was in the appendix, there was some recently released documents which related to the Roswell incident. So I only heard about the Roswell incident in the late 80s, in 87, I think. And then when this book was available, I actually immediately got one. There was only one copy in the entire New South Wales, I think, left. So I rushed over to the Central Coast, got it, and basically photocopied these pages and sent it to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, sort of like a reverse FOIA. So I said, here's the document. What can you tell me about it? Is it real? And as you'll realize later on, it was labeled as bogus by the FBI, but they never investigated it. So this was the Eisenhower briefing document that was published in 1952 that actually gave President Eisenhower, before he took office, details about the situation with the extraterrestrial presence on this planet. So I continued research, and researching the UFO phenomenon, I contacted various people within the field: Stanton Friedman, Peter Davenport, Timothy Good, George Filer, to name a few. And then in 2015, I wanted to actually investigate cases, and I found, after a bit of research, I found MUFON, and so in 2015 I joined as the field investigator. So after that, I got promoted to star team investigator, and then in 2016 I got promoted to the MUFON national director for New Zealand and Australia. And these are some of the previous people who were involved with MUFON at one stage or another. And we do have a website here which you can actually click on to like and share and follow if you like. So it's called the Australian MUFON Australia New Zealand Facebook website. So I thought for this meeting I'd talk about an interesting case involving unfortunately the death of someone in New Zealand. After this case, I'll be talking about cattle mutilations in Australia, and then if we have time, we might talk about Havana syndrome and my interest in Havana syndrome and how does that relate to the UFO phenomenon, and also how does I've been doing some research with the Kennedy assassination, Watergate, and the nuclear factor, which all ties in together. And if we do have time at the end of this talk, I'd like to talk about that as well, but it's going to be just depending upon whether we have enough time. So this case that I'm going to bring up now is called the Canterbury UFO incident. So it occurred in the Canterbury region of New Zealand in 2013. And as I said before, it involved an incident with a vehicle and the death of the driver. So what's unusual about it? I'll get to that in a minute, but involved a 22-year-old male that was driving south on State Highway 6 near Wanaka in Canterbury region of New Zealand on the 24th of October 2013, when an object smashed through his windscreen in the early hours of the morning, causing his unfortunate death. So what happened is that I got an email from MUFON headquarters in the United States alerting me about this incident. They said that a New Zealand lawyer had contacted them. So they forwarded me the email that the New Zealand lawyer sent to them about the case. So I read the email, of course, and I sort of like thought, well, these incidents do happen. Things fall off trucks, they go through windscreens, and sometimes they actually kill the driver or the passenger. So I sort of didn't think too much about it. I thought, well, where's the UFO connection here? So, I spoke to the lawyer, and he said that his hypothesis was that a possible UFO was involved. And I thought, well, how can that be? Can you, give me more details? So I spoke to him at length, and then I did some research myself. But before we begin talking about the hypothesis as to why we think there is a UAP connection, let me just tell you the story a bit. So traveling south on Lake Ha'io, and I'm sorry about the pronunciations of these, Albert Town Road. So he was traveling along this road in the Canterbury region of New Zealand in the early hours of the morning. Driving conditions were fairly poor. The visibility, it was still dark, but slightly raining as well. And then an object hit the windscreen of the vehicle. It was a Subaru Legacy station wagon that the victim was driving. The front passenger, who was his girlfriend, noticed a four-wheel drive past their car, and then it was like a single cab model with high sides, but she said with no canopy. Okay, so she saw the approaching headlights, and she said, quote, "I remember thinking there was something awful about the car. I like maybe the driver was drunk." So indicating that this guy that was coming towards them was actually swerving on the road for some strange reason. They didn't know what was going on. And that she said that something didn't seem quite right. So when the ute passed by, a beige-coloured object about the size of a tissue box or brick, this is just directly quoting from her, rocketed towards them. The front passenger covered her face briefly, so she didn't see anything after that, and heard a crunch thump sound, and then the driver slumped forward in the seat with his arms in his lap. The object continued to travel within the cabin of the vehicle, and then incredibly, exited through the rear window. So how does an object do that? How does an object have enough inertia to actually hit the windscreen, kill the driver, and exit through the rear windscreen? Impossible. The passenger grabbed the steering wheel and tried to lift the driver's foot off the accelerator. She tried to help the driver after the Subaru Legacy came to a stop, but he showed no signs of life. The object had never been found despite extensive searches. In fact, 400 hours of police hours of searching for that object was never found, and I've got a slide for that. So here we've got an aerial view where the actual car went along this blue line, and there's a bit of a zigzag. This is where the accident occurred. This is the actual road, and you can see the Tiawa cutoff road here. It's a cutoff road because you can see all these mailboxes here. So the postman doesn't go down here. He just puts everyone's mail here. And so they were traveling north up here, or whatever that is. Is it north or whatever? Up this road, and there's a zigzaggy part of the road where the accident occurred. And here's a bit of a bend, and the accident occurred around about here. That's just a van. That's nothing to do with it. This is just a photograph of that road that I'd taken, and this is the actual accident site. So you can actually see there's a lot of police vehicles, police rescue squads, helicopters, etc. And there's the vehicle facing the opposite side of the road. So they were coming down here, heading this way, got hit here, and he swerved across to the other side of the road, and his car's now facing the opposite side of the road. So from Google Maps, I estimated that the car stopped about 600 meters away from the Tiawa intersection. As I said before, about 400 man-hours were spent searching the object for the object, and the owners of the white four-wheel drive utility registered in Central Lakes area since 2010. So everyone that had a four-wheel drive that was white were all spoken to, and I believe that they found the person that was actually driving the vehicle, and he said that his canopy was actually on and not off, and the police had suspected nothing unusual about what actually with anything to do with that driver. So there was no evidence to suggest that something was thrown up off the road. So there was nothing on the road that could be visible by the police that something actually hit the road, because you can't have something fall off a truck. If it was something falling off a truck, it'd have to fall off from a great height to hit a car windscreen further down below if it was passing in the opposite direction. Also, if you've got a van that's passing you, or a utility, the level of the utility is roughly the same level as the car. So it'd have to have actually bounced off the road to have gone onto the windscreen. But even if that happened, what sort of inertia would you have? You wouldn't have the inertia to actually give you. They weren't traveling at a very fast speed. As you can see, the road was windy, and so they were only probably doing about 60 kilometers an hour, if that. So several theories have been considered and rejected. The crash investigator Constable Alastair Crossland told us so that however, quoting Alastair Crossland, the only scenario that fitted was an object coming off an approaching vehicle. So that, we believe, that hypothesis can be rejected as well, because there's no way on God's earth that anything could come off that vehicle at that speed and cause that much damage to the car. So there's the sort of vehicle that this that was driving past that vehicle. Okay, it had high sides, so it didn't have anything like this. It wasn't a flat top with no sides. There's your vehicle there. So the object would have had to have hit a bump on the road to have forced something from this unit, the utility. He said he had his canopy on to have caused it to come up and then penetrate that vehicle, which is ludicrous. Nothing like that could possibly ever happen. So the force, let's look at the forces involved without doing the physics. So the force required to smash through a laminated front windscreen of a car is quite enormous. When you think about it, laminated windscreens are very, very tough. They're meant to save lives. Okay, so if you've got something that's coming off the back of a truck, okay, it's reinforced, and it has to hit the front windscreen at quite a tremendous amount of force to actually penetrate through and injure the driver, let alone kill the driver. So the force required to cause the death of the victim. So there's the force required to smash through the windscreen, to kill the victim, and then to penetrate the laminated rear windscreen. How does that happen? It's a bit like the magic bullet that killed Kennedy. So we couldn't work this out, and we thought there's something suspicious about this. We don't know what on earth is going on. So we can see here, this is the actual vehicle, and they've actually taken the entire windscreen out, and they've virtually demolished the entire car. They pulled it all apart. So the object doesn't appear to lose inertia as it's passing through the back windscreen, which is really weird. Part of the body was what part of the body was affected? Only the head. So basically, we don't have access to the post-mortem details of this case, but we did find some information about what the coroner did say, and that was there was a blunt force trauma injury to the head. So what was the magnitude of the force that would be required to cause such a blunt force injury to cause death? And what could actually cause the death of the patient, this person? It could either have been a subarachnoid hemorrhage or a subdural hemorrhage. So that would cause pressure on the brain and then cause pressure on the medulla oblongata, which would cause stopping the breathing, because you've got your phrenic nerve and your vagus nerve coming through here. So, but this would take time. So the force must have been quite enormous to have just instantly killed the driver. So Coroner McElry said that the deceased had a most unusual semicircular wound that was about 8 centimeters in diameter. So what does that give you an indication of? The object was round, like an orb. He said that the object was possibly made of stainless steel, and they had a sandpaper roughness to it, coated with soil. So if that was the case, then this looks very much like the sort of an injury that we'd see that naval surgeons saw about 200 years ago that were called cannonball injuries. The object did not penetrate the windscreen at the initial point of contact either. How did it do that? The object pushed a fist-sized hole through the window. Forensic pathologist Martin Sage, who performed the autopsy, said he hadn't seen wounds like this in more than 30 years of practice. Dr. Sage said the object was at least semicircular, about 8 centimeters wide, and possibly fully spherical. Now, they're the coroner's findings. So they're the forensic findings. And you'll see something later on which is going to dispute that. I wonder why. The object was not disintegrated, so they didn't disintegrate, and despite extensive searches, was never found. Excuse me. So all the possible theories were rejected except for one. And that was, according to the coroner, of course, he's going to go for the most valid hypothesis, is that the passing car, something came off it and it hit the front passenger, which we know is just impossible. The laws of physics won't allow a a hypothesis like that. These are the agencies that were involved in the investigation. So when you have a car accident, who do you think is going to be there? The police? Yes, the forensic department will be involved, but we had the Defence Technology Agency, the Institute of Environmental Science Research in Auckland, the University of Otago, and the US Army were involved. I wonder why. The DTA findings that these chaps here based their photographic evidence on alone, said that the object was unlikely made of solid steel and of a similar density, and had a reasonably sharp corner, which was absolutely rubbish. So they tried to refute the forensic evidence. Police claimed that the US military got involved and destroyed the car. So they got rid of the evidence. How did the object slide off the passengers passing the vehicle? Let's have a look. So if you had a flap down on one of these, and this is not the actual utility that was being driven. If you had a flap down like this on one of your on a utility, yes, something can fall off. Okay, it'll hit the road, it bounce off, and it'll hit the windscreen of the car. Maybe. But again, nothing was seen hitting the ground. Object, can the object scale? Okay, so the bottom of the ute's about here. So again, a perfectly flat road, canopy over, according to the driver, canopy was over the back. Now, I don't know how the passenger could have seen the canopy being taken off. So I don't know about whether she could have possibly seen no canopy on the back of that vehicle. But the driver said he did have the canopy on. Anyway, besides that, on a flat road with no bumps, how could anything come off the back of that vehicle and then hit the oncoming vehicle? It just doesn't seem possible. The only driver had to have come forward. He said that he had his canopy secured. So there was only one driver that came forward and who said he may have been involved, had said that he has canopy on. So the trajectory of the object is inconsistent with the findings. The object could not have fallen off or slid off an oncoming vehicle. The object loses momentum. In other words, it decelerates before it strikes the driver. Because if you think about it, the object's got to smash through the windscreen. Then it's got to, again, it accelerates, gains momentum to actually get out of the vehicle. There's no evidence to suggest that the object was man-made based on its behavior. Drone theory doesn't stand up to scrutiny either. What could the object be based on our evidence and behavior? The hypothesis was that the car was hit by an extraterrestrial orb. That's what we're thinking. Drone, I doubt it. Could have been some sort of probe. Are there any historical incidences of orbs hitting cars? There's many photos and videos of orbs, but have they ever been found? And we're going to be looking at the previous history of orbs on orb activity in New Zealand. Let's look at this video where, and I hope you can hear the sound. Just let me know if you can't. But this is the case in Minnesota in 1979 of a policeman called Val Johnson. And you guys may know of this incident, but it was a police vehicle that was involved in something very similar to what we've just seen.
You and I are about to take a step into a giant puzzle. The mystery begins on the barren landscape of Marshall County, Minnesota. On August 27, 1979, Deputy Val Johnson experiences something incredible.
And suddenly the light that had been there suddenly became here, and it struck my vehicle, causing some damage to it.
I feel that whatever Val told me about the light and the strange incident was true. I don't doubt Val in any way.
Hoax doesn't seem very likely in this case, not only for what all of Johnson's colleagues and friends have indicated about the man, but because of the unusualness of the effects.
I'm convinced that it's something not of the ordinary in nature because of the sequence of the fractures as they occurred and the magnitude of the stresses involved in them.
Deputy Johnson is a policeman. The documentation of his experience comes from an unusual source. We have a recording of the actual radio call that he made seconds after the incident. Listen closely.
407, what is your condition?
I don't know. Something just hit my car. I don't know how to explain it. Strange.
Are you, what's your condition? Are you okay?
Something attacked my car. I heard the glass breaking and the locks, the brakes locked up. I don't know what's going on.
10-4, I'll get a hold of 406 Stephen and send him on his way.
What is it that happened? Deputy Johnson recreated step by step the events of that night.
I was on routine patrol and I came up to this intersection and I looked south and I saw a bright light just over the center of the roadway. My first impression was that maybe it was a semi with one headlight broken out, and then it dawned on me that the light was too big around and too intense for an ordinary headlight.
Go ahead, 407.
Turn 88. 220. 5.
407, what is your condition?
I don't know. Something just hit my car. I don't know how to explain it. Strange.
Are you, what's your condition? Are you okay?
Something attacked my car. I heard the glass breaking and the locks, the brakes locked up. I don't know what's going on.
What happened? What kind of... 10-4, I'll get a hold of 406 Stephen and send him on his way.
Val was rushed to a local hospital where he was examined by Dr. W.A. Pincinalt.
My eyes were extremely painful, as if I'd been subjected to something like arc welder burn or something. There was some salve put in my eyes, and they were covered with an adhesive bandage, but in a matter of 6 to 8 hours, it had cleared up.
Alan Hendry is an investigator with the Center for UFO Studies. Now, on hearing of Val's experience, he came to Marshall County.
The case is quite striking for the simple reason that a law enforcement officer has reported a sighting that left behind damage to his car and injury to his own eyes immediately following the experience. We learned of the Val Johnson case in much the same manner we learn of most of our sighting reports. The deputy of Marshall County contacted us directly via our 800 toll-free phone number, which we've issued to 10,000 police departments around the country. The biggest mystery about the Val Johnson case to me is trying to find one neat explanation for something that could behave the way he described, yet create the kinds of damage that we analyzed and discovered.
Mr. Meridian French, a crash technician for the Ford Motor Company.
A request was made by Mr. Alan Hendry to Ford Motor Company, and through the normal chain of command down to the glass division, I, as the so-called glass expert, was asked to come out and examine the windshield. The cracks in this particular windshield are not unusual in themselves, any one of which I could reproduce myself in the laboratory, but as a group, they're unusual.
French traced the outlines of the shattered windshield in order to analyze the fracture.
I'm convinced that the fractures, as we see here, were made by some type of a blow from the outside of the glass by some firm, probably hard object, but with not sufficient force to crush the glass, but enough force to bend the glass to the point of breaking it. I have not seen anything like this before. They are extremely unusual.
I've been in law enforcement for about 15 years. I've been chief deputy sheriff in Marshall County for 8 years, and I was elected sheriff of Marshall County last January 1st, so I've been in office about a year now. The car itself had busted headlights. The windshield was broke. One of the red lights on top of the roof was broke. The antennas were bent backward, where if an object would have struck them, they should have been bent forward. But they were bent the opposite way, as if some force had bent them. Val Johnson's a very good fellow, and he's a good officer. He has 3 young children and a nice wife, and he's a very reliable person. And my feeling was that whatever happened was strange and unknown, and there was no doubt in my mind that Val was telling what he actually saw.
This is Deputy Val Johnson and his wife, Roseanne, everybody. Now, since that incredible experience that has shocked us all, have you had any other experiences, any other close encounters?
No, sir, no.
Had you had any before this?
No, this is the first one.
Well, how has it changed your life?
Well, it's brought our family unit closer together.
Because it scared everybody so much, you mean?
Well, there was a lot of people confused about it, and a lot of unusual stories that came out about it. But it's brought us closer together as a family unit.
Was it a religious experience for you? Many times these events are a religious experience.
Upon reflection afterwards, it's been about 6 months now. Upon reflection, we've kind of come to the conclusion that perhaps the Creator has made other things that we can't readily see or readily identify, and perhaps this is one of the things we encountered out on the road.
So that was interesting. So basically, this orb had, or whatever it was, had actually hit his car. It didn't penetrate the windscreen, but as you can see, it did some unusual damage. So he's had damage to the one of the headlights, including the windscreen, including a dent in the hood, in the bonnet, and also this aerial being bent in the wrong way. So a similar event, but not quite the same, but similar. Now, have orbs ever been found before? So here's a short video about what most of you might already know about. It's called the Betz sphere, which was found in 1974.
May 26, 1974. Fort George Island, 30 minutes east of Jacksonville, Florida. Terry Betz, a young medical student, and his parents were surveying the damage to the family's land from a recent forest fire when they stumbled upon an object that would forever change their lives. Laying in the ashes was a highly polished metal ball approximately 8 inches in diameter. The sphere had no identifying marks other than a triangle pattern stamped into the surface. At first, the family thought they'd stumbled upon a satellite that had fallen from orbit and started the fire upon impact, but no crater was detected, nor was there any damage to the sphere. The metallic orb was still highly polished and clean. With no explanation at hand, Terry picked up the 22-pound ball and placed it in the trunk of the family car to use as a decorative item in his room. Days passed and the fascination with the sphere diminished until one day Terry was playing guitar in his room. As he was strumming chords, he noticed the ball started to dance around on the shelf where he had left it. At first, Terry thought it was just rolling around from vibrations outside his wall, but as he continued to play, he noticed that the sphere reacted more strongly to certain notes on his guitar. After a few minutes, it began to vibrate on its own. It also emitted high-pitched tones, annoying the family dog. But this was only the beginning of the strange happenings for the Betz household. Later, family members were quoted as saying the music must have triggered something inside the sphere, because from that day forward, the sphere took on a mind of its own. It began to roll throughout the house under its own power, even periodically stopping and starting again without any assistance from family members. One time it rolled around the house for 12 minutes straight, defying all known laws of physics. During sunny days, the sphere was livelier, while on cloudy days it moved slower throughout the house. Terry began to perform experiments to test the sphere. One of the first experiments had the sphere placed on a glass table. It would quickly roll to the edge, stop, reverse course, and roll to the opposite edge, eerily searching for a way off the table, but never falling. He even tilted the table to force the sphere to fall, yet it defiantly would not succumb to gravity, baffling everyone. Another observation came when people tried to shake the sphere. While it would give off a slight rattling sound, once the sphere was placed back down, it would immediately move away from the person who shook it, often speeding away around corners, attempting to hide. The family was so frightened by the sphere's ability to travel freely throughout their house under its own volition that they decided to lock it up and bring in experts for answers. The family reached out to the Jacksonville Journal. The paper sent out seasoned journalist Lon Enger to investigate. Enger, who fully expected to disprove the allegations, was instantly a believer. Having seen it with his own eyes, Enger was later quoted as saying, "Everything that has been said about the object is true." Journalists and scientists alike soon clamored to have the sphere properly tested in a laboratory environment, but the Betz family chose to only allow testing and inspection at their home, fearing that sending the orb off to a lab might mean losing it forever. Soon experts from all over the world descended upon St. George Island to get a glimpse of the mystery sphere. All of the attention soon piqued the interest of NASA and the U.S. military. Upon seeing the sphere in action, a Marine spokesman said publicly that the ball's erratic behavior was inexplicable and that the origin of the sphere could not be determined. As the world took interest in the mystical object, the orb took on even more mysterious behaviors. Music began to emanate from the orb. In addition, the Betz household began to experience poltergeist activity as doors and windows would open and close on their own. No longer being able to withstand the bizarre activity, the family finally decided to send the orb off for testing in April of '74. The U.S. Navy requested the sphere be sent to the nearby naval station in Jacksonville. There, scientists began to study the object, but were immediately baffled. Attempts to analyze the object failed when X-rays could not penetrate the metal surface. The Navy finally brought in a powerful 300 kV X-ray machine. With the stronger machine, naval scientists discovered something unusual. Two round objects surrounded by an unidentifiable halo material with significant density. They also noted that the orb possessed 4 different non-concentric magnetic poles, 2 positive and 2 negative. After 2 weeks, the Navy returned the orb to the Betz family and concluded, "We cannot identify the origin of the sphere nor be 100% sure of the metallic composition." With questions still unanswered, Dr. Carl Wilson from the Omega-1 Institute in Louisiana examined the sphere and added, "The sphere has radio waves coming from it and a magnetic field around it." And the field appeared to fluctuate in potency based on an as yet unidentified pattern, defying the known laws of physics. Next was Dr. James Albert Harder, a professor emeritus of civil and hydraulic engineering at the University of California at Berkeley, who through closer study concluded that the 2 internal spheres are made of elements far heavier than anything known to science at this time. Because of this, he also asserted, if one were to drill into the sphere, perhaps the masses would go critical and explode like an atomic bomb. From the beginning, the tabloid newspaper, the National Enquirer, had offered a $50,000 reward for any proof of alien origin of the object. With mystery still surrounding the sphere even after professional testing, the tabloid assembled a blue ribbon panel to investigate the object. The panel consisted of such notables as Dr. J. Allen Hynek, Dr. James Albert Harder, Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle, biologist Frank B. Salisbury, and Dr. Robert F. Cregan. After a week of extensive testing and discussion, the panel was just as baffled and amazed as those who had tested the orb before, and in summation could neither refute nor provide any further information beyond the previous academic studies of the mystery object. Based on this conclusion, the National Enquirer doubled its offer to $1 million. To date, no one has claimed the $1 million prize, and while there have been many theories, no one has been able to come forth with a legitimate origin for the mystery sphere, nor a plausible explanation as to how it functions on its own, making the Betz mystery sphere one of the most enigmatic mysteries in recorded history.
So, could it have been something like the Betz sphere that hit this car? And by the way, the Betz sphere's disappeared. They don't know where it went to. It was lost. And so we don't have it for scientific research anymore. What about previous history of orb-like activity in New Zealand? Can we look at something like that through the database that we had? And I did go through the database in MUFON to find out exactly what sort of activity was happening in the Canterbury region at the time of this incident. So the lawyer actually lives in the region, and he recalls the famous Kokura UFO sighting in '78, which made worldwide news. And that's what alerted him to the fact that it could have been some sort of unknown object that that could have been a UAP that actually hit this car. So just to give you some bearings, the Canterbury region is in the South Island of New Zealand. It's a well-known hotspot for UFO activity. I'm not going to go through this video because of lack of time, but I think most of us will remember the Kokura UFO sighting in '78, even though we might have been kids or teenagers at that time, where there was a famous sighting of a UFO off an Argus plane that was traveling towards New Zealand from Australia, and there was quite a famous reporter from Australia who's now deceased, who I can't remember his name now, but was traveling on that plane, and they took photographs of this UAP that went worldwide. So the MUFON database was searched, and I found 4 separate sightings of spherical shaped objects that were located in that area in 2013 near the incident site. In June the 12th, 2013, in the Marlborough region, a mother actually reported to MUFON seeing an orb in her son's bedroom whilst putting him to sleep. In August 11th, near Wellington, there were white orbs seen in formation over the water, one disappearing after pulsing. And in August 13, near Wellington, multiple witnesses observed 2 pulsating whitish orange orbs that were observed to execute impossible maneuvers. And on the 22nd of October, 2 days before this incident in Blenheim, a bright white orb was seen to move erratically. So that a MUFON volunteer who we employed to actually tried to contact the witness, sent her an email. This is the passenger on the girlfriend of the deceased. We tried to contact her, and after her research, she sort of like couldn't really make much contact. She couldn't make contact with the witness. She didn't respond. But after her investigation, she said through the media and everything, she said that although there seems to be much information about the case published on various online media and news websites, it can be difficult to ascertain whether this information is from a valid and reliable source. And we didn't obviously receive a reply from the witness. So we decided to put a Freedom of Information request in that was filed in May 2018 for a copy of the information relating to the case, so we could actually see the evidence. Chris Kelly, the police commissioner, so his response was, the information you're requesting is contained in a very large file. The information is also very personal about individuals whose privacy in the circumstances is very relevant. But in saying that, everyone's name was published in the papers, so we didn't quite know what he meant by that. And so the New Zealand Minister of Defence, we contacted him for assistance with the case. And there's our FOIA request. I won't go into that. The request was made for a cost of police time, which is what sometimes happens when there's an investigation like this. It takes up valuable time for the police to go through the records, so they might request compensation for that. The request the family of the deceased for their permission for release of the names and the privacy of investigative staff should not be an issue, because their names are published in a professional capacity. So the cost of the research would have cost us about $35 per half an hour, which is fairly reasonable. But then in the long run, we were denied access to the information. So the family of the deceased were contacted by the police, and they also said that they didn't want the information to be released for whatever reason they had. So so they were still coming to death in terms of the death of their son, which is understandable. But we wanted to help them just to find out, to give them peace of mind. I've said, because there was no real conclusion as to what actually happened and what the circumstances were in this instance. So the requests were made to receive the information with redacted identity. In other words, we said, can you redact the names and addresses and everything, even though they're known they're all already known. And so we still got denied access to the relevant information. And so it just went on and on throughout the years, and we are still investigating this case. And our theory was that, and this is our hypothesis, the white four-wheel drive utility was being chased by a possible UAP, and that's why they were driving erratically. That driver was possibly silenced by the police. The UAP had taken a wrong turn and crashed through an oncoming vehicle, and then just took off, killing the driver, smashing through the rear windscreen, and then going into outer space. So that's an interesting case that we're still trying to follow up, and we're at the stage now where we are possibly going to be given the information, and we'll keep you updated with that. Now on to animal mutilations, which is one of my pet topics. So animal mutilations might be the consequence of, these are just theories: animal predation, government experimentation, cult group activities, or extraterrestrial activity. When did mutilations begin? Well, the very first well-known publication, and most of you will probably know this, in 1967, Appaloosa mare called Lady was in Colorado. She was found deceased with her the flesh around her neck and head completely removed off the bones by her owner when she didn't come home one day. That was worldwide news. But also I did a bit of research, and I found an article as far back as 1894 in Australia, published in the Telegraph, the Brisbane Telegraph of all places, where a pony was actually appeared to be mutilated, because it says it had cuts on the cheek and one on the neck, and tongue removed, etc. The report states that the pony was mutilated with cuts to the neck and cheek, very reminiscent of what's called the jaw swipe in classic cattle mutilations. What's unusual about mutilations? The hide is cut with surgical precision, for starters. Some organs are extracted from the body without any evidence of an opening to pull it through. No tracks leading to the carcass. A horse once found mutilated in the snow had no tracks found around the carcass. No evidence of a struggle. The body is exsanguinated. In other words, all the blood's taken out of the body. And the animal sometimes has broken bones, as if it's been dropped from a great height. Here's a short video on cattle mutilations. I hope we have time to just view this. It's only 8 minutes long. Let's just speed it up a bit.
Since the 1970s, hundreds of cattle have been found dead in the western United States, horribly mutilated. While some maintain that the cattle are the victims of predators and scavengers, others believe that the cattle, like humans, are victims of alien abduction.
Ranchers, they have looked me straight in the eye and have told me about the beam of light that they saw come out of something up in the sky. They didn't know what it was.
The main things that have been reported with us are the UFO-type lights that appear and strange noises that people hear in the area.
the most unusual things, the UFO-type objects.
The coincidence of UFO sightings and cattle mutilations may be nothing more than chance, but there is a pattern that seems to emerge. When the animals are found, it is usually a gruesome scene, remarkably consistent from incident to incident. The animal is alone in an isolated, out-of-the-way location. Typically, there are no tracks leading to or from the carcass, and the other cattle seem to avoid both the dead animal and the area where it lies. A dead cow in a field or a ravine is not remarkable in and of itself, but when the carcass is examined.
Well, the most memorable thing that you would see approaching a cattle mute case would be the lack of blood. There's no blood anywhere. Then the next thing you would see would be the removal of organs in such a precise manner.
Typically, in a cattle mutilation case, ranchers find that the animal's jaw or tongue has been removed, an eye is missing, udders and sexual organs have been excised, and there is a coring of the rectum. Some cattle are also found with mysterious holes in their flesh. And when a necropsy or post-mortem exam is performed, internal organs are said to be missing. Some investigators believe that this is a strong indication of alien involvement.
In more than one case, an entire heart upon a necropsy was missing from inside the chest of an animal with no surgery. There was no excision into the chest. You've got to come up with an instrument that can take a 9-inch by 12-inch heart out of a bull or a cow without penetrating any of the tissue, any of the cartilage, no bones, no surgery. The heart is missing and the pericardium is still inside.
Ufologists believe that the cattle are being abducted and studied by alien life forms. Some propose that human DNA and bovine DNA are similar and that the aliens are trying to fill gaps in their knowledge of human genetics by studying cattle. Others believe that the reason behind the cattle mutilations is environmental.
The fact that they are taking sexual organs, the soft tissue, this would be exactly what you would do if you wanted to find out the impact of pollution on the world, because the pollutants would gather in the soft tissues. And the fact that the cow's chromosome pattern so closely matches human, and the fact that a lot of us eat beef, I think could be a tip-off as to why they're mutilating the cows.
Another piece of evidence that suggests alien involvement to ufologists is that a number of the mutilated cattle seem to have been dropped from above. Cows have been found draped over fences. Some seem to have been dropped through trees. There are also signs of broken bones and an impact crater beneath the dead animal.
We found marks on the cattle around their legs, appear to be clamp marks. We've also found marks on their hide where it appeared to be straps that had been placed on some of these reports. Somehow these cattle are being removed from the area, they're taken somewhere, their blood's removed, their internal organs are removed, and then they're brought back. Why? We don't know.
The question became important enough to prompt a number of American senators to ask the U.S. government to get involved in the cattle mutilation mystery. In 1975, Floyd Haskell, a senator from the state of Colorado, asked the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to be put in charge of the cattle cases. His request was denied. In 1979, Harrison Schmitt, a senator from the state of New Mexico and a former astronaut, called for a federal investigation into the cattle mutilations. The result was Operation Animal Mutilation, chaired by Kenneth Rommel, a former FBI agent. After 1 year, the Rommel report was published. The conclusion: the vast majority of mutilations are caused by predators and scavengers. For some, it only seems logical that the U.S. government itself is behind the mutilations, or complicit in them at the very least. They cite the presence of black helicopters, unmarked military-style aircraft, passing over or near where the mutilated cattle are found as a telltale sign of the government's role. They are the same type of helicopters that are often spotted in other UFO-related investigations.
A flying saucer could explain why they don't have tracks coming into the area around the cattle, but a helicopter could also explain it. We really don't know what we're dealing with.
To me, it became a case of the UFOs were committing mutilations and the government was chasing them to find out what they were up to, or vice versa. And personally, I tend to believe that mutilation are the work of UFOs and that the government has a hand in it by tracking them and trying to figure out what that's all about.
It could be some sort of black project that our government's involved in. It could be something that does involve aliens. Until we get more evidence, we really can't say for sure. It's really theory.
But so, cattle mutilations are still a mystery, and we haven't really made any headway to actually determining what actually causes cattle mutilations. So our leading hypothesis is that it is extraterrestrial in nature. So eyewitness accounts. So are there any eyewitness accounts of an actual mutilation taking place? And this is another video, a really interesting video that I want to show you about a 1973 case in Houston, Texas, of a lady called Judy Doherty, who was driving back home from a night of bingo with her daughter, mother, sister, and brother-in-law, and she noticed a light in the sky like a large spotlight in the paddock. She pulled over to get a better look and got out of the car and heard no noise associated with the sighting. She described the light as having a substance or particles that were moving closer. She could see moving, swirling. She could see an animal that was near the top squirming around and almost being as if it was being sucked in. Well, let's have a listen to this video, and I'm just going to take it up to the part where Judy is actually being taken under hypnotic regression by Leo Sprinkle, sorry.
One of the investigators.
They look, their hands look funny. They have long claw nails, like, they have very large eyes. They're very hypnotic, like they're so big that, and they don't blink. Their eyes do not blink. It's almost like a snake. They were very snappy about their movements, and they knew exactly what they were doing, and I felt a little better because for some reason they projected that it was necessary this be done, that, you know, it was for our betterment, for the betterment of mankind that this was done, that they were more or less watching out for us.
So you felt better when you had that
yes.
impression of not only precision but also a benevolent or a kind attitude
right.
toward people? Mm-hmm.
I can't say that they were kind.
But concerned?
I can't even say that they were concerned. Mm-hmm. They were just like doing a job that evidently it affects them too. And it has to do with somehow nuclear waste or testing, or they've been here for quite some time, and they test the soil as well as our water, as well as our animal life, our vegetation. when I question why they aren't saying more and why they can't stop it if they're so knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
And they get angry. I don't know. I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm. You don't know why they get angry?
I don't know why they get angry, and I don't know why if they can't stop it, if they're so knowledgeable.
At one point in the hypnosis session, Judy doesn't understand why she can see her daughter Cindy in the car 1 minute and gone the next.
Breathing deeply and easy, let yourself relax. You can be aware of yourself standing by the side of the car. You can be aware of yourself standing in the craft. And now let yourself be aware of where Cindy is.
I know I have a feeling of fear.
Okay, let yourself go on through the experience. Let yourself go on through the fear. What impressions come to mind?
I just visualize her on a table.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what happens next?
I am afraid that it's going to happen to her, what they did to the animal.
Yeah. Just let yourself relax.
Forget it. No, I don't want to.
You can tolerate it. You know it.
No, I can't.
You know it's all right. Just let yourself go on through. Just relax deeply. You know that everything's going to be okay. You see Cindy on the table. What happens next?
I'm just afraid that they're going to hurt her.
Yeah, you're afraid, but you let yourself go ahead and let yourself go on through the experience. You can be aware. Just let yourself relax deeply. You can be aware of what happens next.
They put her to sleep, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You put her to sleep. Okay, what's happening now?
They're just examining her, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so afraid that they're going to cut her or something.
Okay. Do you say anything?
They don't listen. They just ignore me and just go about their work like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't seem to have any emotions. They don't seem to care. I thought they were going to harm her. I thought they were going to do to her what they did to the animals, you know.
But they don't harm her?
No.
No? Okay, well, what does happen?
They just take some samples from her.
Mm-hmm. What kind of samples?
I don't know, just scrapings, like they go inside her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I can see her laying there, and they just kind of scrape little pieces off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other samples?
That's all I can remember.
The preceding scenes were taken from a 4-hour hypnosis session. Dr. Sprinkle stated afterward that Judy Doherty is, in his professional opinion, a sincere, honest, and credible person.
I'll just stop that there. So obviously Judy had gone through quite a bit of trauma. She stopped the vehicle on the side of the road, and then all of a sudden she appeared to be in the craft with her daughter. That actually had taken that calf off that property, and later on they actually found the calf on that property mutilated. Now, in an Australian case, that was my very first case that I found that I was notified about, was a mutilated ram in Geelong, which was reported to me in a private email from somebody who lived in that area, well, actually was the owner of the ram. A 14-month-old ram that weighed about 90 kilos, previously very healthy, no unusual behavior, was found in the west paddock that was visible from the house on October 4th in 2016. And there's Geelong, so there's their property there. That's the actual farmhouse, and it's on quite a large acreage. It's around about 271 acres approximately. So there's the actual property with sheep on it. And so before I show you the actual ram that was mutilated, there was no presence of blood at the site. There was no blood found on the fleece of the animal. There were no signs of struggle. A friend of the owner of the property was staying overnight, and he said he saw a red light moving around the paddock from the bedroom at 4 a.m. in the morning on the 1st. So the ram was found on the 4th of October 2016, and he saw this object a few days earlier in the paddock. And the head of the ram appears as if it had been severed, with a little bit of flesh attaching its head to the rest of its body. And I've just done a recreation. So this is the actual paddock that the ram was found in. So what the owner, a friend of the owner said that they saw this red-like light in the paddock at 4 a.m. in the morning a few days earlier. So the bottom jaw of the animal had been removed of all the flesh, and it was missing flesh and skin had been removed. It wasn't clear if there were any physical traces left on the grass immediately under the body of the ram. One of the children had described an ET abduction experience to the family at one stage, and as you can see here, the lower jaw has been stripped of flesh, and you can see the ram's been beheaded in a way, but the flesh around the jaw has been completely removed, and with surgical precision around the actual jaw. So I contacted Richard Hall and David Caton in the UK about this and sent them the photographs. I also contacted Linda Moulton Howe, who's the lady that you just saw in that, not the one that was being hypnotized, but the prior video. She's quite well known in the States. Linda didn't respond to my email. And so the animal pathology field unit did reply to me, and their conclusion that it was ET modus operandi. They said that it's most likely a case of a mutilated ram. So we've only just got time for one more mutilation. So I'll talk about the casino cattle mutilations, which occurred in northern New South Wales in the 1970s. And I only investigated the case in 2018. But I did interview the farmhand. This was a well-documented case. So we'll be looking at cattle mutilations around the casino. There was another mutilation, which I probably won't have time to talk to you about, in Mackay. So let's just look at the casino mutilations. So we contacted and spoke to several of the witnesses regarding cattle mutilations in the casino area, including major witnesses. I spoke at length to the veterinarian who doesn't want to be named, other than we call him Dr. S, that examined the cattle that were mutilated at the time. The next video is from a Today Tonight special broadcast about that cattle mutilation, but we won't probably have time to look at that because it is getting on. So note that the attitude of the media in this video regarding the ET hypothesis explanation, which was pretty lame. Basically, the media were obviously poo-pooing the idea that aliens were responsible for this particular instance, and it was the stigma associated with the phenomenon back in those days. So I contacted Mr. Barry Patch, who was 81 when I interviewed him in 2018. He recalled the Channel 7 special that was made on that in 1997 on that case study. Barry was the farmhand who managed the two adjoining properties, which are 2,500 acres, approximately in size, from owned by a Melbourne investor. The cattle mutilations lasted for a period of about from between 1977 and 79, and they abruptly stopped after 1979. So the cattle mainly affected were the 4 to 5 year old cows that were in about 6 to 7 months in calf. So no blood was found, no animals would go near the carcasses. The cattle appeared to have experienced a sudden death with no signs of struggle and no cause of death. So that the actual mutilations wouldn't have caused the death of the animal. The mutilations occurred during the actual, while the animal was alive, and then the animal suddenly became deceased. So often the tongue had been removed, the udder had been removed with surgical precision. So examination of the brains of one of the cattle that was mutilated found a consistency of strawberry jam. Organs excised in these cases were never found. Some of the organs excised were never found except for the first cow that was mutilated. So the uterus of one of the cows was removed with no evidence of surgical hole used to retrieve it. The uterus and trachea of a cow were found hanging off a fence. Cattle appeared to have been dropped into foot-high grass where no tracks or footprints in the form of compressed grass were found leading up to the carcass. A mutilated cow was on the ground for 3 weeks and the flesh was cut and it was still fresh after 3 weeks, just very unusual. And the farmhand did this neat little trick where he tried to work out whether whatever was doing this was actually going through the front gate of the property. So he put a piece of green cotton and tied it to the end of the middle part of the gate here. So that just opens up. There are 2 parts of the gate that just open up. He put some green thread around it and it wasn't broken, and they found that the cattle had been mutilated in the paddock. So whatever went into the paddock in a different way other than the gate or through the fence or wherever. So if they had entered the paddock, they didn't actually go through the gate with a vehicle or whatever. So during the years that the mutilations occurred, Barry said that he and his grandson Lachlan witnessed a glowing red cylinder object over the paddock one evening between 8 and 8:30. So a lot of these cases involve sightings of a light either before or after or during cattle mutilation. So there was an unusual purple fog, according to Barry, as well on the horizon at the time of the sighting, and there was a smell of burnt wood. And I've just drawn this illustration here to give you an idea of what it might have looked like. So the object was sighted about 100 feet up in the sky. It was about 50 feet long from the distance that it was from the observer. So here's some pictures of what were given to me. So one of the more bizarre cases of cattle mutilations was a stillborn breech birth calf that was mutilated within the uterus of the cow that had died. So the details of this type of mutilation in this instance were not clear, except that both the cow and the stillborn calf had a classic jaw swipe incision. So as I said, I interviewed the veterinarian. Dr. S was a retired veterinarian when I called him in 2008, January 2018. He observed and reported these mutilations in Casino at the time. He confirmed with me that 3 farms were involved and that approximately 34 head of cattle met with unusual deaths and post-death trauma consistent with the animal type mutilation injuries. So of the 34 cattle that had died, 12 were distinctly mutilated. So during the period of 77 to 79, approximately 92 head of cattle had died. Not all of them died through mutilation. Some of them died through poisoning by eating noxious weeds, or they might have had a Clostridium infection. Some of them ended up dying through eating this what's called green cestrum, which is a noxious plant. So the mutilations occurred in a small community called Spring Grove, approximately 5 kilometres east of Casino. All the farm's records were destroyed, unfortunately, and no photographs were ever taken by either the veterinarian or the farmhand, unfortunately. The first animal mutilations were examined by Dr. S was a cow who had a midline incision from its rib to its udder, and it had its as you know, or as you may know, cows have 4 stomachs. So in this instance, the omasum was removed in this cow without cutting any other organ. And to a doctor, to a veterinarian, that almost seems impossible. So it was almost impossible to remove the omasum, which is one of the stomachs of the cow, without cutting other organs. And that's quoting him directly, like the rumen, the abomasum, the reticulum, or other small intestines. So if it were not for the difficulty of the procedure, it might have been done by a cult group, considering that the actual omasum is called the Bible because of the folds of the rugae in the stomach wall lining. The organ was found lying in the paddock. However, the udder of the animal was also removed but never found. There were no obvious causes of death in the mutilated cattle that was observed by the veterinarian. What is obvious is that the cattle were killed instantly without struggle before they were mutilated. The cuts were clean. No abdominal muscle was cut in the process of the removal of the udder. And it's quite rare to see this type of surgery. However, there are 4 to 5 butcher shops around, and some of them are proficient with their knife, but they could never reproduce this sort of these sort of cuts. So initial thoughts by the veterinarian was that there might have been a butcher that didn't like the landowner and was seeking retaliation, or someone had done something wrong, or someone was jealous. The police were eventually involved in this case, and they assumed that the damage was done by foxes, which is laughable. So the veterinarian, Dr. S, didn't find this explanation by the police to be satisfactory, so he put in a complaint. He lodged a complaint in 1978 about the police not taking the matter seriously. They didn't bring tracker dogs or anything. So since the police were ever since the police were involved, the mutilations ceased. Barry Patch was then suspected of actually being involved. But they couldn't find any evidence to suggest that Barry was actually involved. So I just went round in loops. So the mutilations continued a few months later again. And on this occasion, one of the veterinarian's own cows was mutilated. It was a Holstein Friesian cow, which was spooked and ran into some tea tree scrub in the night. And according to his observations, the cow was a very placid cow, but was terrified on this instance. And the cow was found lodged in the bush, dead, with its udder and tongue removed. So the cuts and incisions made on the mutilated bodies were very clean, scalloped, about 3 inches long, as if done by a very like a scalpel blade. One of the mutilations was notably different, as the cow had a vagina and anus removed cleanly to a certain depth. And this is what comes up a lot of the times with the anal corings. They're always to a certain depth that they'll go to. So the cow did not appear to have a reasonable cause of death. One of the vexing questions was, how can a human kill an animal as big as a full-grown cow without any visible means of leaving no traces in the body? So this is when I posed this question to Dr. S, the veterinarian. And I said, how can a human do this? And he said, well, the only way a human could do this is to use a pea shooter and use a curare-type drug like succinylmethonium chloride. And I said, well, what about the blood? There's no blood found on the site. The bodies are drained of the blood. So And also he examined the hides of these animals and found no puncture holes or marks were ever found on the hide. So no one was using pea shooters or like darts or anything like that to anesthetize the animals. So that theory was scrapped. So unusually, most of the mutilations occurred on a Wednesday night for some strange reason in the summer months. In one of the mutilations, the tissue was removed around the neck of the cow in a very strange way. The vertebrae of the neck were exposed, and all the tissue around the mandible was found missing as well. And also the periosteum, which is a very small, if you look at this diagram here, this is so like a section through a long bone, say the femur. What you have is this very thin layer of tissue called periosteum, which lines the bone. So in this case, the periosteum was intact in all these mutilation cases. It was never damaged. And what's unusual about that is that this shouldn't happen. If this animal was attacked by another animal like a dingo, or if it was attacked by a human with a scalpel blade, when you get near bone, the periosteum is always damaged. And in fact, it was perfectly intact. So that's an anomaly. So with regard to the periosteum, the vet had assured me that the cuts were definitely not made by an animal, and that would have ripped the periosteum into multiple regions of the bone and the tearing of the flesh of the bone. Same reason if someone used a knife or a scalpel blade to take the flesh off the bone, they would have definitely cut the periosteum. So that's the enigma of these cattle mutilations, as well as no blood. Unfortunately, blood samples weren't taken in this case, so we couldn't trace for, couldn't do tests for tranquilizers. The tissue samples were taken and sent to Wollongbar Agriculture Research Station. We rang them in several years back, and they said that they had no records of them because it happened so long ago, and they would have thrown the tissue out. And so I might stop it there because we're at 8:30 now. So I'll just stop it there. And so Cheryl, I'll just leave it up to you from now on if you want to talk about anything further. So I'll just talk a little bit about Havana syndrome. So I've got an interest in Havana syndrome, which most of you probably would have heard of. So what it is, it's a directed attack on individuals in the United States and Canada, and it involves people who are usually either associated with the Secret Service, so they could be intelligence officers, or they are diplomats. So what happens with these people is that it strikes people out of the blue. So it'll just be one person will be selected, and I say selected in inverted commas because it appears to be random, but it'll select an individual where that individual will hear something. It'll be a really sharp, loud noise. The noise will affect them in the way that their concentration starts to lapse, and it could be just any particular part of the house that they're living in or the unit that they're living in. So it's a directed energy that actually goes into the ear and somehow damages the brain. So we don't know, as a neuroscientist, it's quite confounding that you can actually get, oh, this is what's happening, and we don't know who's causing it. So the thing is that it's an unknown thing that's causing damage to the brains of people who are in the intelligence community through a directed energy beam. So basically, there's been various studies done by the ODNI. There's various other people who have other groups like the Jason organization that involve specialized scientists who are crack scientists that can actually usually work out a problem that no one else can actually work out. So basically, these people are being targeted. They've excluded a foreign adversary. And what's interesting is that ever since these attacks started, it almost coincides with the actual release of the UAP videos by the Pentagon. So my theory is that it might be non-human intelligence. And for what reason? Well, maybe they don't want disclosure to happen. So this is a theory that I'm trying to develop now through studying the phenomenon, looking at research papers, etc. So that's what I'm looking at with the Havana syndrome at the moment. So if they drop it, and they know that we don't have the evidence to pin it on them. Like there's no direct evidence to say, okay, yeah, look, we can actually test this carcass and say there's a bit of residue from the craft, that's in that animal. They know we can't work it out. I'm pretty convinced that there is no hypothesis other than extraterrestrial that this is occurring. It's been going on since the 60s and possibly earlier. And there's an FBI investigation on it. There's been multiple investigations by authorities that cannot work this out. So it's a bit like crop circles, animal mutilations. They're all in that box where you can't pin an actor on it. And usually it's a bit like Havana syndrome. You can't pin an actor on it. So this is another thing that's come up these days that it's an enigma. We can't work out who the actor is. So they don't take it because they know that if they drop it on the ground, they're not going to be, we're not going to be able to pin it on them. So why bother? Just drop it. It's not the US government, because it occurs. It's occurred here in Australia, and I mean, why would the US government be looking at our cattle? And usually the mutilations occur in areas where it's extremely isolated. So they're in very, very isolated areas, and there's no evidence. Like if it was human, then you would see evidence, because we are not superior beings, I don't think, compared to the extraterrestrials. We leave evidence. It's just like at a crime scene. If you look at any crime scene, usually you'll find evidence. In this instance, no evidence.
Thanks a lot, Roger, for joining us. Really appreciate your time. I know that you've had other things you had to do, but thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks,
Roger.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Cheryl.
So we'll see you again.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks.